So today's post-show conversation is called Honor Her, Holding Remembrance and Grief with Our Own Mental Health. I am so excited to have Alica Forneret here today. She is a consultant, educator, writer, and the creator of the Mourning Herald. I have met her along this journey, learning about the grief space. Alica, thank you so much for being here. You have my heart.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We also have Holly Chan and Elizabeth Wong. They are the co-founders of Death Over Dim Sum, an organization dedicated to AAPI discussions about aging, caregiving, and end of life. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having us, Susan.
Of course.
Thank you. Yeah. And thanks for ruining our makeup.
I don't even
I was just texting Liz like, oh no, I don't want to put up my video.
All good. We have space for everything here today. And for the audience, in terms of format, how this is all going to run is we are going to have a 30-minute conversation about our theme today, and then we're going to open it up for audience Q&A. So please use the Q&A function in the chat, or not in the chat, in the Q&A function, and upvote your favorite questions. All right, all of y'all, what's going through your mind right now? Holly, Elizabeth, Alica?
I'm happy to jump in. I did the prompt about unfinished conversations. And I think what I'm trying to balance in my mind right now is the feeling of like regret and guilt, and also the feeling of opportunity to have conversations with people who are still living. And I found myself sort of writing, I was like, I wish I'd asked this person this and had this conversation with this person and talked to this person about this. But then I was like, but there is still space for me to hold appreciation for the fact that I can ask people like my dad some of those questions, or have those conversations and resolve some pieces of it with other family members. So I think, yeah, I'm feeling that balancing, sort of trying to balance that out right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I say that one of the lines in the show is that my mom is saying, you're so focused on the dead, you need to focus on the living. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh man, there is still this opportunity. Like I was just talking to my aunts the other day and I was like, they're like really like the last living image of my mother, you know, besides my own body, but like there's still her in a way. Elizabeth, you look a little teary-eyed. Tell me what's on your mind right now.
I just want to lose it. I just want to say thank you. I've been wanting to see this for so long, and just to have the opportunity to see it today. I think with it being Mother's Day, I'm so close to my mother, and she's still alive. We celebrated her yesterday. And in the 4 reflection questions that you've asked, gosh, so many things. I mean, I don't know if I should just even try to pick off some of the thoughts that came up for each of the questions.
You want to share?
But you brought about I forget the actual question of number 1, but I put avenge for mom's sacrifice. For me, there's a different spin. When I hear my mom's story of her immigrating here, she still echoes to this day. In Chinese, though, is Zhang He. So it's like, I don't even know how to literally translate that in English. Holly, you understand what I'm saying? It's sort of saying like, you know, I have this sacrifice. I want you out of your own life to kind of take what I've already created and really make do for yourself. But what ends up being a struggle is, as I'm trying to do that, how do we not butt up against what our parents want for us? So in what you were sharing, I just saw a lot of those themes that came up. And this whole thing of, gosh, the conversations about, you know, that we can still have. So on one hand, I'm really grateful, and I really see the opportunity that my mom is still here and I can have conversations. Then that's part of, like, you know, how she's saying to me now, why are you always focusing on helping old people? And and I said, it's because of, like, accepting that, you know, life is impermanent, that this is why I'm having these conversations with you. And I want to ask these questions before I don't have the chance to ask these questions. I want to learn your stories. And so part of that is just being really present to, you know, we only have today, and to really have the courage to ask these questions.
Yeah. And this is coming from Elizabeth. Your job is, you're an end of life doula. You're not a pregnancy doula. You're an end of life doula. I love that this job exists.
Well, she's kind of.
Well, I'm a labor delivery nurse, so
she works at both ends.
I love it. Great. How about you, Holly? What's going through your mind right now?
I think I'm one of the lucky few Asian American born children that feels like she's in a good place with her parents right now. And it's been after a lot of work among, like, my immediate family, my sisters. I think we took the pandemic and used it for a lot of healing. And that came in the wake, though, of our remaining living grandparents passing away in the past couple of years. So that's the most immediate grief that I've been dealing with lately. And it's not just the grief of losing a grandparent and my parents losing their parents, but also unresolved stories, and knowing that my grandparents didn't really know who I was. My paternal grandparents and I, we didn't speak the same language, and towards the end of life, the language that I had learned to try to speak with them ended up not really working out anyways, because my grandmother hit her head a couple times and then could only speak Thai, which I didn't learn. I learned Chinese in an attempt to try to communicate with my grandparents more. And there were attempts in the past, to, like, write letters, to have very short phone calls, or even just try to share photos and try to describe things in my limited Chinese, but they never really knew who I was. And I was kind of, like, resigned to this idea that I'm just going to be this child that they know about, that they kind of get updates about from my folks, but they never really understood, like, what I was even doing with my life, like what I was afraid of, what I was happy about, and what I wanted to know from them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, across generations, it's always like, do you see me the way I want to be seen? You know, and also, can you allow me in so I can also see you the way you want to be seen? Alica, you are doing a lot of work with grieving, and you created a grieving guide for Mother's Day and Father's Day, and it's a 2-month-long program of lots of events. How do we do this work? How do we do this work without going crazy?
Oh, I mean, I've had my days. And, I think what's important is finding the space when we feel like we're bumping up on that boundary. And most importantly, for me, I can speak for myself and how I do this work. I have people in my life, mainly my husband, who says, like, girl, we need a walk, or like, you need to eat. I will put the bowl in front of you tonight. And I think that, like, this work, as we all know, it is endless. It is full of our heart and compassion and committing really what feels like our full body to this industry. And having those boundaries put up by ourselves or for other people is incredibly, incredibly important.
I mean, Holly, Elizabeth, like, do you see anything that's very specific in the AAPI communities that you weren't getting in the general forum about grieving that you could add or take, you know, or maybe even challenge with what Alica just said?
Yeah, do you know what's interesting? I didn't start crying at these events until we started doing the Asian American table talks. I've been in conversations and worked with people in the grief and end of life and death care spaces, and it's been a passion of mine for the past however many years since I was like a kid in high school. But it's it only got real recently, I think, for me. And I don't like saying that because like it sounds like I was just kind of like sitting in on these conversations without like having experienced real grief or real loss. And then as soon as the conversation started to lean more towards more Asian American, Pacific Islander, especially women, and other children of immigrants, it started to really hit me how unprepared I was for like even like setting up the boundaries of like feeling grief or understanding grief. And I think I was used to kind of professionally alienating myself from the subject, or like reading into the subject and being a part of the conversations on a kind of like professional or research end, instead of as a person that was going to experience it, that was currently experiencing grief. And so this is still kind of new to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait a minute. Okay, so Holly and Lisa, you both just used the word boundaries. Can you give me more examples of what boundaries look like? And if I'm the person who is grieving, what does that look like? And if I have never lost anyone before and I want to support a friend or a friend, how do I also do that? Like, give us the lowdown on boundaries, because we talk about it a lot, and it always seems like that's like the hardest thing to do.
For this conversation, it's like I don't, especially in the Asian American space, I don't know how to make the conversation not about me, and I don't want to talk about myself in a way that makes me feel vulnerable and makes me tear up or have a crackly voice. I want to hear about other people, and I don't want to reveal all the ugliness or ugly thoughts or intrusive thoughts that have accumulated inside about these subjects, about family, about being Asian American, and so forth. So that's what I mean by boundaries, and kind of like just like making sure that I can still be a part of the conversation, but not wanting to give too much of myself to the conversation.
And
Which I'm sure is not super healthy.
I was just going to say that I'm the opposite of Holly in that space. I only know my own story. So in some ways, I feel like my boundaries is only to be speaking of my own experience that then maybe other people can resonate with, or out of my own sharing can identify, sort of like how you shared your story through your art. My boundaries that I struggle with are how do I share how it's impacting me, my relationship with my mom, without it then maybe crossing over where my sister is more private, or my mom doesn't want certain things shared. And sort of like in this concept of, are we exploiting the story? But that's still a part of me. So how do I share it being a part of me with then, huh?
Still your story too.
It's still and I've had that conversation with my sister, because many a times my sister will say, oh my God, my friend just came up to me and you posted something, and like when my dad died, and it was I just shared, it was, my dad dying. But people who know me, who know my sister, then started reaching out to her and, sharing condolences, and my sister wasn't ready. And I had to have that conversation with my sister. I'm sorry, but it's still my dad. Like, I get it. But like, so those are the boundaries that I sometimes, like, do I check in first? And then how is it then where it's my grief? That is my grief, And so those are the things that I kind of struggle with boundaries.
Yeah, it's complicated, right? It's like, it's family. Like there's, depending on if you're an only child or not, but everyone was impacted. Right? And that's what I try to show in my show, is like everyone grieves in their own way. And it's not like anyone's right or wrong or more advanced, but it's just like, how do you meet people, but how do you still honor and own what you need to own in your process? Elisa, have you found that to be difficult, that or controversial, or did you ever get in any hot water?
No, my my dad and our relationship has shifted into something so much more expansive than it ever was. So I think for me, I took down some boundaries with my family. But it did, I think the first time, I recognized that we all grieve differently was when, everyone started showing up at my mom's funeral a couple days after she died. And I was hosting and I was like in it. I was like, spreadsheets, get the chairs there, order the food. I was like the organizer. And I realized when my aunt started coming in, my sister was there, my dad was there. I was like, oh, I lost a mom. My sister lost a mom, but she lost a mom who she had a very different relationship. My dad lost his friend and his wife. My aunt lost her friend and her sister. And I think that like that early opportunity to recognize how complex everyone else's relationship was with my mom allowed me to think pretty early on, like, oh shit, I just how I'm doing it doesn't have to be the right way, but how I'm doing it, I need to recognize how different it's going to be for all of us. But I haven't gotten in any hot water yet.
I've gotten into hot water.
But then if everyone grieved the same way, then nothing would get done. And I don't think someone's legacy would be well represented if everyone just kind of only grieved in one way, or only grieved in one correct way, because people's relationships with each other are complicated, and complications is where you get the color in people's lives.
Absolutely. And
rather than like, an obituary where it's just like fact, Wikipedia, and none of the nuance of knowing the person.
Yeah, I really hear that piece about, if I really appreciate what you said about if we all grieved in the same way, nothing would get done. Because I know, like, for me on that weekend of her funeral, like, it was a part of my grieving process to order those shrimp. And even if my dad didn't want to order those shrimp and my sister didn't want to order those shrimp, I was going to get those things done. And what my dad did is he talked to people. What my sister did is she like held space for herself to grieve, and all of the things that we individually needed to get done that weekend and in the years since, like, because we're having different experiences, it allows us to move together collectively.
And similarly, even though I'm more overt in my expression of grief compared to my sister, like, we all play a different role, and that's how we could, like, it's not one role is more important than the other. But I also, her being the way she is also supports me in the way that I grieve. And then I think what I've been seeing is, because I'm so unshy of talking about our mom's mortality and things like that, it's really, I think, opened up her, maybe if she was in denial about it, or maybe not quite there about where my mom is in terms of, her life. I see her coming around. I see her wanting to make more effort to have conversations with my mom. Because I've been really straight with those conversations with my sister. I said, however your relationship with mom is, it's yours. I just don't want you to live with regret. And and just leaving it up to her, but I say what I say, I let her do. And now I see, same thing with my nieces, because there's that generational, like, when you talk about what are some of the things that you want to continue to capture. So my sister is more Western culture. And so even going to the cemetery to pay respects to our grandmother, and my sister doesn't know, but recently my sister wants my mom to teach the grandchildren the traditions. And to do that, and I think there is a part of her that she realizes she doesn't know. She still wants my mom to be able to pass that on to the grandchild, whether or not they're going to do it or not. So I think in some ways, rather than being apologetic of how I show my grief or how I talk about it, I think we just have to do us, and then how other people will see themselves is, as long as we hold the space for them to show up the way they need to show up, it's fine,
Yeah. Yeah, it's Elizabeth, what you're saying about, like, you always assume mom's gonna do it. Mom's always gonna do it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, we're the adults. We're now the adults. Like, I always think in my brain, I'm like 21, but I'm not 21 anymore. But now we're the adults. And I just launched this podcast called Model Minority Moms. And we talk about all these pressures of like growing up but still having to be everything for everyone in our society. And that's what one of the episodes is called, is Now We're the Freaking Adults. And so the question is like, how do we want to design this experience of how are we going to normalize this is how we deal with death, or how do we talk about death with our kids or our nieces or our nephews? Holly, I wanted to go back to what you were talking about your feelings. And
let's talk about feelings, Susan.
yeah, I'm like the queen of feelings.
Talk about feelings.
And I wanted to talk about a little bit more. Were you getting at that there was just some shame wrapped up in expressing your feelings?
So I think that part of this kind of came out of the conversation that we just had, but when it comes to like, it's not just about talking to our kids about grief and death and planning and mourning. For me, it's also talking to my parents about it. I don't have any kids. I've got a cat, but I have parents still, and I have my sisters and my family, and our relationship over the past decade has been built upon the recognition of mental health and the importance of it.
And it's been stigmatized, right? Like,
yeah. Oh gosh.
No one wants to talk about it, or if you need services and there's something seriously wrong with you. Or I remember I was doing research and about Vietnamese refugees and boat people and the services that they did and did not accept. And they used to have this perception that schizophrenia is like, it's your fault and it should be hidden away, right? And so when you have something kind of like on the spectrum, which is like, well, how do we deal with grief and anxiety? There's really, it just feels so binary. Like it doesn't feel like there's room for that.
And understanding that like, it's not just depression. Depression isn't just a color that covers everything. Like it gets so much complicated. Like what started off as like teenage anxiety and depression escalated for me to like a full-blown diagnosis of a personality disorder in adulthood. And having to explain that to my parents, to prove to them, number one, that I was now taking care of myself by getting medication, by getting therapy, but also having to admit to them that I had a personality disorder, that it wasn't just depression, and this is, and how it manifests has kind of explained some of my failed relationships in the past, or like my reactions to some things, like different types of grief, like end of a relationship, dying of a relationship, or even like with my grandparents' death, and just having to be able to speak transparently about that to my parents has been a long journey over my whole lifetime, but especially over the past 10 years. And I think these days my parents are really cognizant of what it means for me to talk openly about mental health, especially on social media. Because it used to be like when I went to therapy as a kid, like don't tell anyone that you're in therapy. Don't mention your therapist. Like you don't need medication. It'll be on your record and you won't be able to be hired, and things like that.
Yeah.
And now they know that's not true, and it's a lot more normal than we really recognize. And it's, for the most part, like helped me become more functional than I was before. But something that has changed is that my parents are more willing to talk to me about their own experiences with anxiety, depression, and their own grief with their own parents and their relationship.
So what was a turning point? Do you think it was like you were just educating them on this and over time they became more aware? Or do you think like they were getting...
I got my own insurance. I graduated college as an art student, and yet I still got a full-time job that gave me benefits that included insurance, that included pretty good mental health care programs. So I got my own insurance, was able to get my own therapist and psychiatrist and get myself medicated.
Yeah.
And that was a turning point when they realized they had, I mean, number one, I think they realized they had no say in this, but also I think they simultaneously made the realization that okay, she's an adult now, and I'm proud of her for taking care of herself. And they actually did literally tell me that at some point, that they were proud of me for taking care of myself and taking initiative, even if it meant that I was medicated now, and even if I had a diagnosis on my record.
Totally. I mean, there's something real. I mean, I'm a child of refugees and immigrants, and there's something really intense about parents wanting you to be stable and that you can take care of yourself. You know, like I think that that's one of their biggest worries, and that when you can show that you can do that, like, you know, hopefully the relationship isn't just always parent-child, but like the relationship can start to evolve to being like adult almost. Okay, so it's Mother's Day weekend, which is very hard for some people, whether their mother is alive or not, or their caregiver or their nurturer. And I know I spent maybe 20 years pretending Mother's Day didn't exist. And I would just not do anything. I didn't buy mom flowers. I didn't go to her grave. I never talked to my siblings about mom, because no one talked about mom, right? Because she had such a shameful death. And that was the MO, which is, if you're talking about the past, you're hanging on to the past, you're too emotional, that's your problem. Don't bring that over here. And it's only been in the last 5 years that, as I've been working on the show, I feel more closer to my mom. And last week was her birthday. And I was FaceTiming my sister. I had a little like passion fruit, guava cheesecake, put a candle there, put my mom's picture, this picture right here, and lit incense. And I called my sister, and we sang happy birthday. And I could barely croak out happy birthday because it just like, it breaks me. But at least this year, I can actually call my sister and do that. Like, that's actually really big for me. And so I guess my question to you all is, I mean, how do you honor people while maintaining your mental health? Did you see something that changed for you? How is that for you? Like, do you have your own rituals around it, or do you not? Is that okay? Is it okay not to do anything? Is it okay to just take time just for yourself? Or like, tell me. And Alica, I know you have been talking about this. Can you give us some do's and don'ts, or what's okay, what's not okay, what's normal? Like, please help.
I mean, anything that is safe is normal and appropriate. Like, yesterday, I think the first part of your question is like, do we need to do a thing? Do we need to like honor our person? Do I need to cry? Do I need to like stare at her photo for 4 hours tomorrow? No, I don't need to do anything. And what I typically do around this time of year, whether or not I'm hosting events, and my husband also, again, has been really good at helping me with this, is like, okay, we're going to make a list of the things that could feel good. Maybe that's going to be like going to this place, eating this thing, partaking in this ritual, whatever it is. So I have a list and a menu of things to choose from when I wake up on Sunday. If I choose to wake up that morning and I say, I don't want to do any of that, I want to stay in bed, I want to go to an amusement park, I want to go to the ocean, it doesn't matter. But for me, that preparation of just thinking about how am I going to make this day potentially safer for myself, that gives me some peace. And also, I just love control and lists and stuff, so that's probably a piece of it too. And then I think in terms of like what do's and don'ts, listen to your body. If you can, check in with your body. I listened to my body last night and I had a milkshake and some French fries, and that was what I needed. And I listened to my body this morning. I needed to wear sweats. Like, these are things that literally my skin is telling me that I am too stressed to be wearing tight clothes. So I'm going to wear sweatpants today. And I think that like just that simple act of acknowledging that it's going to be hard, like you're talking about, and then validating that by doing something that feels safe for us is all that we need to worry about on a weekend like this.
Totally. Elizabeth, Holly?
I think just to continue with that, it's just oftentimes we don't give ourselves permission to just in general, whatever that is, right? So kind of along the line of what feels right is to give ourselves permission to do what feels right. oftentimes we're stretched in so many ways. We're worried about other people, you know, how it's going to affect them, that we do take away. Part of that is self-care. I mean, I'm, you know, being a nurse and stuff, I'm not usually the best person to do self-care, but even now in doing this work, I am more attentive to what my body is feeling. Like even last week, it was zinging. I don't know what that zinging was, but there was a buzzing. And it was sort of like, I then realized it was probably anxiety, you know, underlying some kind of anxiety, but just trying to figure out what it is that I'm anxious about. So part of it is just taking that time to process. And if you feel like sleeping in, sleep in. If you feel like calling a friend and having that person call your friend, you know, to have a conversation. And it's important to, I think someone brought up just having the space. It is creating your community and finding people around you that does provide that safe space for you to be ugly and, you know, or laugh or inappropriate or whatever it is. We all need somebody or a community like that. So.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, I wanted to start opening up the conversation to include questions from the audience. Actually, to the point that, or the last point that you guys were answering, we had a question from Sandra who asked, how do you deal with conflicts within the family as each individual is grieving in their own way? For instance, when our mother passed away, my brother and I developed conflicts with how running that household should adjust, how to continue providing care to our elderly father, whether we should hold a memorial service or wake and funeral, etc.
Who wants to take this?
I'm deferring to you, Free, because I honestly have this question too, because I haven't experienced this myself.
Well, I mean, the first thing is my husband and I actively talk about death, and I'm like super stressed out. He does very high risk sports. And so I said, I don't want to get in a fight with your family. So we need to like literally write down exactly what you want to have happen. So it was actually in this past year that we created our will, which was our first thing, and our trust, which was great. But I was like, bro, do you want to be cremated? Where do you want to be scattered? Like, I don't want to be left with the responsibility and the judgment from other people about what we privately talked about. Like, I need this written down because I actually don't, when this all goes down, I don't want another layer of complication of something else I need to deal with. Because as Elisa said, you're all of a sudden the organizer of all these events and activities, but you're also like, where's your space to grieve? However, I'm saying all this, but I have not yet talked to my dad about his end of life request and care, because it feels almost inappropriate. Like it feels like I'm crossing a line somehow, like anticipating his death, even though we all, I feel like that's the problem, is that we all walk around pretending we're immortal. I'll get to it later, later, but it's like, actually we don't have forever. And then in terms of answering that other question about just family conflict, it sounds like, is Sandra still in the household with her brother? Is that the origin of that? That's hard. That's so hard because it's also your hierarchy and how decisions were made beforehand, right? Like in a way, like that can just kind of hover over and dominate, even though it's not working. In my ideal fantasy world, which didn't happen with my family, I would go to grief counseling and family counseling and have like a third party help us navigate these really difficult conversations. My family did not do that. I wish we did. I still wish we do. So it's freaking hard. It's complicated. Elizabeth, Elisa?
Let's see. So I think part of it is like, because of all of that, I do try to muster up courage. And I've had those conversations with my mom. Like you said, it feels wrong in the beginning, but over time it comes from a space of using the language that they're accustomed to, like they don't want to be a burden. And how do we honor your parents? So when I have those conversations with my mom, I actually help them see. Part of it is I don't think they see, so we have to help them see how it's not a burden to talk to us about it. And in fact, when you don't talk to us about it, it does become a burden, because then we don't know, we have to guess. And that has helped me open up the conversation with my mom. I literally had to point blank say, you don't want to be a burden. this is how you don't be a burden, is to have the conversation with me. And over time, she has opened up. So I now know what her preference is. Now, the conversation sometimes I feel is so much more important than completing the advance directive. But in healthcare and everything, that's like the first go-to. Like, we think if they complete an advance directive, they've done the job, but they don't share anything with the family. And so even though I'm the eldest and being the nurse, my mom has told me her wishes, but I also have a sister whose relationship is not as close. So my mom always says, you will know when the time comes. And rather than just stopping there, I've said to my mom, I know when you die, you don't want my sister and I fighting. So this is why it's important for you to actually, I know your wishes, but I need you to tell it to both my sister and I, so she hears it coming from you. And she got it. She goes, well, then let's have this meeting. But it was so much like just painting it for them. I don't know that sometimes in the culture they get it. And then that shifted. So then that's how we started having conversations. Then when it comes to the grieving part, when my dad died, I had no relationship with him. My parents were divorced when we were 6 or 7, but it became really important for me to see him one last time. And that ended up evolving into me planning his funeral and not knowing all of that. And of course, my sister and my mom had their own feelings about that. Like, why? He wasn't a father to you. Why are you doing all of this? You know? And how I navigated them and giving them the space to grieve was just basically saying, this is something I want to do. I will share with you all the planning and you participate in whatever capacity you want.
Wow.
But over time, they participated in choosing the casket and figuring out how to do it. But I never pushed. I just said, I know it's important to me. You don't have to do it. And again, letting each person just sort of have the space to choose and not making it wrong. So.
Wow. That's awesome.
So actually on the same subject as family, we had a second audience question from Jessica. This is to Susan. How has your family reacted to this body of work? And have you been able to find positive and healing through this process? And are they still shut off or do they still feel shut off or feel exploited?
Yeah. Family is this like living organism, right? It's never like, then we are done. Then everything is great. I will say 2 of my siblings, Wendy and Kang, they saw the initial show. They've been with me on the journey. They come to post-show conversations, and I can actively see their relationship with mom changing. Like, my sister sent me photos. There's like an annual death holiday, and she sent me pictures of her and her kids at mom's gravesite cleaning the grave, and I'm like, great. And she tells me about dreams that she has about mom, and we like actively talk about mom now. And with my brother Kang, he has an altar set up for my mom and actively lights incense for her, even though he used to say that was kind of like an old school thing to do. Like, now he is taking on those traditions. My other brother Hang and my dad don't want to watch the show. They don't want to engage and participate, and that's the boundary that they set, and I'm going to go respect that. Now, family is a living organism. So I recently wrote a piece called Dear Ba'a, which is a letter I would never send to my father. And it's about intergenerational distance, emotional distance. And I posted it on YouTube, and my dad actually loves YouTube. Like, he watches cooking shows in Vietnamese, and he watched it, and I was like, oh my God, this was the letter I would never send. And he watched it, and like, we tried to have a conversation about it, and then it like blew up with my siblings, and my very supportive siblings had their own feelings about it, because they're like, hey, this is not showing the whole picture. Like, and it became very controversial, and so it's now banned in my family, and I took it down because I realized we're talking about emotional distance. I wish we could be closer. And then this even drove us even farther apart. So I had to mend each of those relationships. I'm still working on one of them right now. So yeah, like, sometimes I'm in hot water about this, because everyone's level of privacy, like Elizabeth, you were talking about with your sister, is so different. Like me, I am an extrovert. I'm an external processor. Like, I feel so comfortable in front of thousands of people, which I don't know if there's a disorder for that or what, but like, I'm happy to be very vulnerable all the time, right? That's just my MO. I will say though, that maybe a year after my show launched, my dad called me and he said, "Hey, I've been chanting for your mother for 40 days. And so to free her spirit because she was in limbo." I said, "You did?" He goes, "Yeah." And he's like, "And in preparation for your birth for your son, I'm also going to chant for you." And so we don't actively talk about my mom. I never asked him to chant for mom, but that's it, is that I want them all to be a certain way. I want us all to hug. I want us all to cry. I want us all to like be so close. I want us to be full house family. I really do. And I don't know if we're ever going to be that in our lifetime. And I have to respect that everyone's in their own process and doing their own thing. But I have seen that when I do the work for me, irrespective if they're going to change, I see inevitable shifting. Because what is happening is I'm changing. So if we're all an organism, if I'm not just perpetuating the old narrative or acting like 11-year-old Susan and being the youngest and being the baby, if I change, and with the Dear Bob piece, I finally texted my dad and I was super direct about it. And he was super direct back and I was able to apologize. And he texted back, he goes, "Nobody's perfect." And I was just like, wow, like we went to a totally new place, but it's because I had to do my own work. So that's why I say we're a living organism, and you have to also do it for you, not with a secret agenda, because that comes with its own expectations and disappointment you're going to have with family. But if you can do things sincerely for you, I will promise you that it is inevitable that everyone will change, because we're just moving like that.
So actually with that, I just want to say that we are at the 4-minute mark. So I'm going to end the public Q&A question with actually a clarification question we received from Bruce. He asked, when you kept mentioning destiny in the play, were they saying Zuin Sol? I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but yes, is that the, I'll type it out in the chat box as well. Zuin Sol is, I think, how you pronounce it. But I think he wanted to clarify if that was the term that was being used.
Maybe Yuing So. So Ga Yuing is to, I think it's to have, the word isn't coincidence, but it's like interlocking purpose or something, or a purpose with it. And so is destiny. But together, I think that is the right concept, which is like, it was meant to happen. Like that was how it was written. I know the book of The Alchemist calls it Makta. So yes, that is the right concept. So we're nearing the end of our program, and I just really want to thank each of our speakers for coming tonight and sharing your wisdom, because this work has been a lifetime of work, and it's been so much effort and love that you've come to this very place. So that's been a lot of wisdom that you've acquired over time. I was wondering how to keep in touch with you all. Do you have upcoming events? Is there something that you can plug that everyone should totally know about? Elisa.
Yeah, I can share first. I will share a link to my website and my Instagram where you can follow me. And I have an event that kicks off this weekend called Caregiving 2021. And so I used to host an event called Motherless Mother's Day that was for people whose moms had died. This year, we've expanded it to anyone who's lost a parent or a caregiver, a grandparent, a mentor, etc. So I invite everyone to join me for that starting this weekend.
Yeah, and you've got great guides and like amazing weekly emails, like, and they're funny and they're lighthearted. They're just so honest and conversational. Thank you for creating all these resources that you do.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, Death Over Dim Summers.
Yeah, so I'm about to post a link to our next event on May 14th. We'll be holding an event called Between Worlds, Living and Dying as a Mixed Race Asian. For that, we'll be having a panel of people who are from all different spheres, but they all share in common the experience of being a mixed race Asian. And it'll be a discussion about identity and what it's like to grieve, not just for a loss, but also for a loss of identity or a change of identity. So that will be coming up on May 14th, and I'll post a link to register for that. We're also on Instagram as at Deaf Over Dim Sum, which it's in my name.
Okay.
And Liz, if you have anything to add, because you've
Oh,
got
yeah, I was just going to say, then following the May 14th event, we do also have a follow-up tea chat, which is on the 21st, which allows for more conversation. So there's 2 back-to-back events related to the same topic.
I met most, I mean, I see your work all over the Reimagine website, who is a great marketing partner for our event and this entire weekends of events. So I know that's where a lot of your information lives. And I want to thank Oakland Asian Cultural Center for like being the most amazing co-presenting partner to make this awesome weekend happen. We have the sequel, Over 140 Pounds, screening actually at 7 o'clock. Is it 7 o'clock? 6:30? Happening after the show. And then we also have 140 Pounds and Over 140 Pounds tomorrow. Each of the shows have different post-show conversation themes. And yeah, I mean, it's just space for you to be and bring all the feelings. And thank you for your time. Spread the word. Tell people about this event. For anyone you know, you're like, oh, this would be perfect for Sheila. You know, like text them and let them know that there's space for all types of feelings this weekend. So
I also wanted to close with by saying thank you to Susan, Elisa, Holly, Elizabeth. The discussion was fantastic. I had to hold back tears. But I also really wanted to thank all of our attendees today for watching the screening and staying after to join us in this conversation. We really do hope to see you back again for the sequel, Over 140 Pounds. But we also hope that you visit our website, oacc.cc, to check out a lot of our other upcoming programs for Asian Pacific Heritage Month. They're all virtual programs, and so you can take place with us anywhere. So again, thank you. Happy Mother's Day weekend, and we really thank you for your time today.
all right, bye.
Bye, everyone.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.